Good afternoon. Looks like we've got 12:10, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks to everyone for being with us this morning and continuing with us into the afternoon. We're going to talk about crisis care and recovery. We've heard a lot about pivoting in 2020 and 2021, and I think it all comes down to adaptation. All organisms must adapt for basic existence and survival. The three diverse organizations that we have with us this afternoon have excelled at this basic need and continue to change and adapt, not only for their own business, organizational health and survival, but more importantly, to provide and uplift the students, customers, and communities of which they serve, and ultimately to help provide food equality. So this afternoon we have with us Jennifer Wheeler, School Nutrition Director at Marion County Public Schools, Leandra Forman, Operations Manager at Food Chain, and Sarah Vaughan, Programs Director at Feeding Kentucky. So Jennifer, let's get started and hear about the challenges, successes that we were able to experience at Marion County Schools.
Hi, thank you, Chad. I am Jennifer Wheeler. I'm the School Nutrition Director here in Marion County Public Schools. Just to share a little bit of our story, but I'm going to start with a quote from a business partner in another business venture I'm in. She reminds us in our business venture always that blessed are the flexible because they will never get bent out of shape. And that has certainly been true over this last year. So just kind of keep that in mind. A little history on Marion County Public Schools, or a little information. We are a rural school district, relatively small, right in the center of Kentucky. We have about 3,200 students, about 600 staff members total. That's everybody from our cafeteria staff to our administrative team. And we are all getting our COVID shots today, so we're kind of excited about that. But getting to the work at hand. So our school district, I have been this food service director for 4 years now. When I was hired in this district, there was no farm to school initiative going on. We were very much a process breaded, pre-prepared chicken something most days of the week. We've worked really hard as a school district to, one, make our menu something our kids want to eat when they're in school. And then two, bring about that farm to school initiative. And kind of how I got that started, I met with our extension office people here in Marion County my first year in this role and said, this is what I want to do. And they set up a meeting for me with any local farmer who was interested in participating. So that's how I got my start with our farm to school program. And I'll talk a little bit through the rest of this about what we're currently using or what we've used through the last year. Another bit of information about Marion County Public Schools, we are what is called through the USDA National School Lunch Program, a CEP school district. That's community eligibility provision. That essentially means we feed every child in our district at no charge. That is a federally funded program. It is based on poverty level in the community. So that tells you that our people are in need. Food insecurity is an issue in this area. We've got people that farm and they have their own gardens and those kids have food. But we've got lots of kids that live in our low income neighborhoods that they're really struggling. They've struggled through this pandemic. We know in a regular year that when they come to school on Monday, they're starving because they may not have eaten much of anything Saturday and Sunday. So we work really hard to provide good, hot, nutritious meals that kids really enjoy on a regular basis. One of our goals is to make sure that all of our meals are equitable for everybody across the grade levels, and make sure that there's things that everybody wants. So that's a little bit of our history. We also, as a school district, operate a huge, what we call our Summer Dream Academy, summer programs, and we have things that go on all summer, or in a normal year, we didn't this past summer, but in a normal year, we have things that go on all summer. So that means we have kids on campus and kids participating in programs all summer. My program feeds those kids all summer long, which is a great time for me to use my farm to school partners and bring in local produce. As we know, getting local things in the winter right now is a little hard, but those crops come in June, July, August, September. That's when I get a lot of my local stuff. We have become a Kentucky Proud School District, and that reimbursement helps us hugely on being able to offset the cost of what those local products would cost us compared to what we can get on our big box trucks. And as I've told our farmers, I prefer to go local if I can. It's good for our students. It's good for our community. It's good for our farmers. That provides that strong community tie. So that's something we've really worked hard at finding ways to fund. We've worked hard at finding grants to help offset those costs. When the pandemic hit, this time last year, or I was getting ready to leave for a school nutrition conference in Washington, D.C., where we were actually going to get to meet with legislators about school nutrition policies. That conference did happen. I got on a plane to come home on Friday before the world shut down on the 13th. So I was there in DC on the ground with legislators and the ag commissioner as things were unfolded, and got firsthand information of what we were going to be able to do back in our school districts, which really helped me come in and be ready to hit the ground running. That Friday when I was sitting in the airport and getting ready to get on the plane, I was continually texting with our administrative team here in the district and my managers about what we were going to be doing the next week. So we had a plan before I ever got off that plane. So we started out our plan. We were doing daily pickup. We were running buses out. We weren't running buses to every home like some school districts were doing. We were taking buses to drop points out in our community. So we had buses about every 5 miles. And we did that for a while. We started out doing it daily. We realized that families just didn't see the value in coming daily. So we shifted to doing that weekly. So I shifted to, when my families came, they got 7 breakfasts, 7 lunches, and 7 snacks at one time. And I made sure it was things that you could really use. People struggled with fruits and vegetables. I didn't really have problems with fruits and vegetables because I went to things like people got whole potatoes. They got, whole fresh apples. They got oranges. They didn't get individually wrapped small packages per child. They got whole of each of those things. And that, to me, and what I've told my team was, if I'm a mom and I'm coming through and I'm struggling and I get 5 potatoes for my child and I've got 2 or 3 children, what can I do with 5 potatoes over the course of a week to keep my family fed? So we tried to look at it that way, as opposed to individual child and individually wrapped items. I had better luck getting produce that way than a lot of my colleagues in other school districts did. So we continued sending those buses out until April-ish. But then our weather started getting a little warmer and we couldn't hold milk. We didn't have enough coolers. We couldn't hold milk safely on buses for that amount of time, and our other cold products. So we did pull into our school districts and served out of our school buildings where we had refrigeration and freezer and could just bring out enough at a time for people to come through and pick up. At the height of everything, we were serving about 3,800 children, 7 meals a week. When people were panicking, you couldn't get things in the groceries. Because we were allowed to operate under the summer food service program, we could serve anybody under 18, not just our enrolled students. So we had lots of people coming through picking up for their enrolled students and their younger children they had at home. So at the height, we were serving lots of people in our community. And that kind of trickled down when we came back in the fall. People started, the grocery stores started having things. There weren't things out of stock like they had been. You could get meat, you could get your produce. So our numbers trickled down a little bit. But then every time the governor would go on the TV and say, our numbers have spiked, we're shutting things back down, or, limit your outings and those sorts of things, our numbers would shoot back up. If you all remember, the week before Thanksgiving, maybe 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, in ways to try to keep the numbers from spiking, lots of things, restaurants and things kind of got shut back down. And we distributed the next day after that announcement on the TV, and our numbers went through the roof. We were scrambling that day to make sure we had enough food to feed everybody. And one of our big things is we are not turning you away. It might not be exactly the same for the last person. If my numbers had been being at feeding 3,000 children and I have 4,000 come through, at the end, you might not get the same things that people got at the beginning, because we're going to scramble and we're going to put things together for you. But I'm going to have planned for a little over what my normal had been. So that's been kind of our process. We did shut down and stop feeding in June and July. We as a district, myself, my superintendent, agreed and really felt like our food service staff, our bus staff, needed that summer break to rejuvenate. They had worked hard. They had never stopped. They had never taken off during any of the spring when so many other things were completely shut down. And they worked harder at that time, and the work was so much different than anything they had ever done before. They needed that break. So I worked really hard and found us a program to participate in where our families could still get food. They just weren't getting it from us as a school district. We participated in a program with Baylor University. Families did have to go in and sign up, but they received meals through UPS, FedEx, and we had about 2,000 children signed up for those meals that were delivered every other week through Baylor University. So that allowed our people a break, but continued to serve our community. So when we came back and we started back in August, I wanted to get those local things in. I knew I had talked to a couple of my local farmers, and they were like, we've got all this stuff and we've not been able to move it as well as we normally do. So we made the commitment that we were going to use the things we had asked for. So our first feeding, I called the gentleman here in the community that I normally get watermelons from, and I said, hey, have you got 3,000 watermelons for me for next week? And I could hear just kind of a pregnant pause in his voice when he said that, or when I asked that. But he provided. He went and got trailers, and we had trailer loads of watermelons. So every family that came through, you got a watermelon per child. Now we did have some people say, "Oh my God, I can't use 10 watermelons," and we accommodated. We did have some apples and other things to give them if they didn't all want a watermelon. And then we had watermelons and cantaloupes for the next week too. And we did that. We continue to do that and have that local watermelon, cantaloupes, and those types of things into August, as long as the farmers could get them for us. I also worked with Hinton's out of LaRue County, Lee's out of LaRue County. We're very close. That's a bordering county, to get apples and pears and corn on the cob. One of the big constraints school districts have with using local is if it comes in and it's brought, if the corn on the cob is brought in and it's still got the shucks on it and we have to clean it, we don't have the time, we don't have the labor to do that. So Lee's and Hodgenville actually processed, they cleaned, they cut, they processed, they froze, they deliver local corn to us in cases frozen. Looks very similar to what it would off my box truck. And she actually had enough, and she's still delivering it to me. So we've used local corn pretty much the whole time we've been in school. But we sent that out in our bags to our families too when we were doing curbside. So that is kind of our history through the pandemic. We hopefully, if nothing major happens, Lord willing, the creek don't rise type of thing. And now we had flooding this week. So, but we hope to have all of our kids back in school next Monday. Our numbers are low enough. We feel like we're safe to do that. So we hope that we have our children in our buildings, feeding them in our buildings starting Monday. And hopefully we can finish out the school year that way. So they will be receiving those meals. I have lessened our menu a little bit, kind of narrowed that down to make it a little more manageable for all the packaging our people have to do, but it's still got very good options on it. And you're welcome to go look at our district webpage and look at our menus. They are posted. For the future, I do want to continue to build partnerships with our local farmers. Meat is something I've not explored as far as local meat. And part of that is just the expense of that. I don't know getting that in the quantities that I need. So if some of you all that are on the call that can help us with more produce want to reach out to me, I would love to hear from you. And that's my story.
Jennifer, those are remarkable stories, and love the ingenuity to help fill the gaps, when your staff needed their breaks, and, however, the breaks never existed for the children or their families. One of the incredible numbers that you had shared with me previously, though, that I might have missed, but if you could share it again, is the number of meals that were served from March to January.
Let me pull, give me just a second and I can pull that up, because I do keep a running total of that. My superintendent actually reports that at our board meetings.
And while you're finding that number, I do know we have some other participants on the call today that are involved with proteins that do service other school districts within the Commonwealth. So hopefully those that are doing so can reach out to Jennifer and help them.
We have served a little over 1 million meals from March to the end of January. So, and we, like I said, we keep plugging along. One thing I didn't mention, and this kind of goes back to one of the people in one of the earlier segments with our Summer Dream Academy, myself and another administrator here in our office worked in 2019 to offer a program to our students where we took them on farm tours, and we took them to Kentucky Proud establishments. So like we took elementary students to Marksberry Farms in Gary County. We took middle school to Shaker Village, and they toured, and then they got to eat there, which was neat for our kids. Even though they get to eat in our district, that's just a neat, different type of meal for our kids.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for all that you do for your community, and for sharing with us this afternoon. Next on our panel is another one that is boots on the ground, very much as Jennifer was. And we have Leandra Forman with Food Chain in Lexington. Take it away, Leandra. I think we've got you muted, Leandra.
Can you hear me?
Now we've got you.
We can.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you, Leandra.
We heard you for a second. No. Down by where your mute button is there a little vertical arrow in that button? And can you select, is the right microphone selected in that menu?
Hello.
I can hear you.
Okay. I don't know. I just tested it.
Okay.
Okay. Guess I should have tested it earlier. Okay. Sorry about that. My name is Leandra Forman. I am the operations director of Food Chain. Food Chain is a 501c3 nonprofit located in Lexington, Kentucky. Our mission is to forge links between our community and fresh food using education and demonstration of sustainable food systems. We have been around since 2011 is when we were formed, and our groundbreaking of our aquaponics farm was in 2013. So we have existed for a while, but we have kind of evolved to have many different forms and many different ways of addressing inequalities and sustainability within our local food system. So when we were formed, we were originally just an indoor aquaponics farm, providing education and providing demonstration of innovative ways to farm and innovative ways for restaurants and eaters to connect with urban agriculture in that growing method. Since then, in 2017, we built a teaching and processing kitchen. That teaching and processing kitchen expanded upon the groundwork of our aquaponics farm, really doing more in-depth education, focusing on food literacy and cooking education for youth, for seniors, for refugees, for families experiencing food insecurity, and doing after-school programs. We also launched then our food sector job training program focused on connecting unemployed and underemployed residents of Fayette County with job opportunities in the diversity of food system employment. Within that, we also did seconds processing with local produce. So some of that was produce we acquired as a donation through Glean Kentucky from local farmers. Some of it was purchased at seconds pricing, and some of it was acquired in partnership with Feeding Kentucky. That seconds processing went into a diversity of programs, including community meals that we held every month here in our kitchen. It went into local restaurants and institutions to create season extension for Kentucky Proud Produce. And then it went into our educational programs and Fayette County Public Schools programs. The summer of 2019, we launched our inaugural summer food service program, where we served as a site for feeding Fayette County youth. So anyone 1 to 18 could come here and get a meal all summer long from us. And we really focus on working with programs like the Kentucky Kids Eat program and KVIP funding to get as much Kentucky Proud Produce into that summer feeding program as we possibly could, and creating educational initiatives around that local produce for the children who are receiving meals through us. In the March of 2020, as we were looking into the pandemic shutdown, myself and our education director were both at a Wallace Center conference in New Orleans. Ashton Potter-Wright was also there. So we were a part of a group of Kentuckians. Lillian was there as well. So we were all kind of in this moment down in New Orleans, all wondering if we had made the right decision to go to the conference. But one of the amazing things that we gained at that conference was the opportunity to look at the pandemic, at what its potential effects in the food system could be, and really problem solve with national thinkers from a diversity of food system businesses and nonprofits about the ripple out effects of a shutdown, whether that be on farmers, food hubs, producers, processors, meat processing, SNAP recipients, school districts. All of those groups were represented in that group, in that discussion about the pandemic effects. And so it was this really amazing opportunity to kind of think through a lot of what might happen with a shutdown. So when we returned to Lexington from that conference, we were kind of geared up and ready to go with meal production, with thinking about how we were going to respond to the pandemic shutdown. Because of our unique position, you know, we had this full service kitchen. We had the ability to receive large quantities of produce, and we had the attention and support of both restaurants, funders, and farmers because of how we have utilized our resources in the past with all of the different programs we've operated. So as soon as restaurants began shutting down, we began receiving donated produce and turning that into meals that were going out through pantries and through our front doors and through community connections that we had formed. that has since just continued to grow because we were a SFSP participant in past summers. We were able to maintain that status and immediately start serving meals for families and youth in Fayette County and get that reimbursed through that USDA program. In addition to meals that were going out through the public school system for families. So we were able to kind of look at Lexington and look at how Fayette County has many gaps of service and view those gaps not as absences, but as opportunities for us to connect the funders that were reaching out to us about how to problem solve some of these food system issues they were seeing, and making sure that that funding was going directly into the hands of the people that were getting missed. So since then, we have grown to do about 5,000 meals every week. Since the November, we have changed our model. We still partner with lots of community feeding sites, but we have also gone to a home delivery service. And so that home delivery allows us to reach families who are not able to have the transportation to get to the school handout sites or to other handout sites or to pantries, really focusing our efforts on families and homebound seniors. So a lot of our model is based on connecting funding with local produce and purchasing from local producers, as well as paying restaurants who have had to either shut down their public dining options at different times or had to decrease that greatly from their former levels of service, especially, caterers and things like this who are reliant upon large group gatherings to be able to employ people. We've been able to help them pivot by being able to issue contracts to connect those meal providers with the funding to create meals to serve to recipients at our partner agencies and through different programs. And all of this is really powered by the fact that we just believe here at Food Chain that a food system response has to be holistic. It has to really look at all of the different people along a chain in the food system and ensure that equity is being addressed at each one of those stages, and that it really means food is a human right, and it is something that we as a community have to band together and problem solve together in order to make sure that not only does everyone have access to food and access to food that is nourishing, healthy, and sustainably produced, but that everyone along that chain has to be able to maintain a healthy lifestyle in order to make that food system resilient and sustainable. And so that means we need living wages for the people who are producing those meals, for the farmers that are growing them, for the transportation to get it there, and that the funding for all of those living wage steps along that path doesn't necessarily have to be paid by the end consumer, because sometimes it's not practical for that to be the case. And so what Food Chain has really done is look at how we as a community member can help make some of those connections and really forge those links between groups who may have similar interests but may not be connected. So a lot of times, I don't know before the pandemic how many restaurants thought about seeking public contracts to provide meals to food pantries, but that is now a connection that is deep and intrinsic here in Lexington, and a relationship between restaurants, chefs, and culinary professionals who are now actively visiting, thinking about, and cooking for pantry recipients every day. And that to me is one of the most beautiful things in this model, is how those relationships have that were forced out of the beginning of the pandemic now have the opportunity to grow into the future and become longstanding sustainable parts of what a healthy food system looks like. I don't want to take up too much time because we also want to make sure Sarah has a chance to talk. And I just do want to plug that Sarah's work at Feeding Kentucky has been intrinsic in the work we do. We've partnered with her on processing for food pantries even before the pandemic began. And we also continue to partner with Feeding Kentucky as a fortunate recipient of their Farms to Food Banks program.
Leandra, thanks for the amazing work in your comments. And we certainly appreciate what you and Food Chain do for the community and your recipients to make sure that they both are resilient and, great story. So with that, we will take your lead and we'll let these questions build up that we can hopefully gather at the end and move on to Sarah Vaughan. If we've learned anything from Leandra and Jennifer already, it is that these panelists are not only plugged in with what's happening within the state, but per their stories plugged in nationally, both of them coming back from their trips with action plans in place to begin, addressing the needs of the community and rolling out those plans. So it's fantastic. And now as we hear from Sarah with Feeding Kentucky, she's going to tell you she may not be boots on the ground, but she's definitely behind the scenes and making sure that these resources are properly directed. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chad, and hello, everybody. And I'm happy to be here today. And as Chad mentioned, we are more kind of a step removed from we're not boots on the ground. So we're not directly handing meals to people, but we're trying to provide services to those agencies across the state that are boots on the ground. So I'm the programs director at Feeding Kentucky, and I coordinate our Farms to Food Banks program. And just a little bit about that program, that is where we purchase fresh produce and other agricultural products and distribute those to our food banks and partner agencies across the state free of charge. And that program has been going on since 2011. And our organization was formed in 2001. So we've been around for a while, but also, as Leandra mentioned, we've kind of evolved over time into what we're doing now. But when the pandemic hit, I know I certainly wasn't expecting it, and most of us had never had anything quite like this happen before, so there wasn't really a plan in place for what we would do. But as a lot of the food pantries and schools and everything were shutting down, our food pantries were struggling to have volunteers to help get the food out, because a lot of their volunteer base were retired or senior citizens who were at high risk for COVID-19. And so they were instructed to go home and be safe. And then also a lot of school groups volunteer at food pantries as well. And with school moving to virtual, there weren't any field trips. And so a lot of our food banks told us that they were struggling with volunteers. So one thing that we tried to do is get the Kentucky National Guard to come in and volunteer at our food banks. Governor Beshear really helped with that, get that going. They were packing school meals, backpacks that would go home with children for the weekend, providing them food to eat, and just doing other tasks around the food banks that were needed. And we also received an outpour of donations due to the pandemic. Like, our community stepped up in a really big way, and that was part of the reason that we were able to do everything that we did. So we, thanks to a grant from the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, it was TFAP, or the Emergency Food Assistance Program. We received $25,000 from that program that was used to purchase 52 or 56 refrigerators and or freezers for 52 food pantries. So a couple of food pantries got more than one unit, but that went to food pantries across the entire state. And as it was mentioned earlier, I believe by Brent, about people panicking and going and purchasing meat. Well, people also did that with refrigerators and freezers and cold storage equipment. So we purchased that equipment back in March of 2020, and here in March of 2021, we're still trying to get the last few pieces of that equipment distributed to these pantries. The majority of it has been placed, but there's still 4 or 5 units that we're waiting on. But that's one way we stepped up. And we also tried to do a lot of advocating for our food banks. So which every year we have a virtual, or we have a lobby day where we go to the state capitol and try to advocate for more resources for our food banks and our member agencies, and just people struggling with hunger in general. This year we had a virtual event, which went really well. And we also try to educate the public about hunger, like stereotypes associated with hunger. And also this year we received a grant to help raise awareness about PEBT, the pandemic EBT program. So we fielded a lot of calls about that, and we've put information on our website for other COVID-related resources that are available. And new this year, well, we received a large grant from Kentucky Farm Bureau. They have an annual fundraiser called Clays for a Cause, and they gave us funding that was to purchase agricultural products. And we also, there was a federal farms to food banks type program. And using some of these large donations that we received, we were able to purchase more meat and protein items than we ever have before. So in the past, we hadn't really delved a lot into buying meat because, as Jennifer mentioned, it is expensive, and you can blow through your funding pretty quick and not get a whole lot of bang for your buck, whereas produce is a lot cheaper for us. But using this funding, we were able to distribute 83,000 pounds of pork, beef, chicken, and then almost 10,000 pounds of cheese, 80,000 pounds of eggs, and 2.7 million pounds of produce in 2020. We also worked with 371 farmers from 63 counties. And on average, those farmers received about $2,000, but the farmer that received the most amount of money got $122,000 this year. So we really do make an impact, whether, I mean, it might be small for certain farmers, but we can't do any of this alone. And I think that's one thing that's been echoed throughout this whole all day, is that we have to work together for a common cause in order to make a difference. Because I'm just one person, we're a small staff of 5 people here. And before the pandemic started, we were a staff of 3. So we've had a lot of transitions in our office, and we're really excited about moving forward. I think that we've got a good start moving towards where we want to be. So thank you guys for having me, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Sarah, I don't think there's any question as to the impact which Feed in Kentucky makes. And for those that may not be fully aware of the scope of what you provide, can you share with us the number of hubs that you operate, the number of food pantries that you support? And then finally, I think you also might have had a number that you shared previously with the number of farmers that you work with.
Sure. So we have 7 food bank locations throughout the state. And when I say a food bank, I'm talking about a large warehouse, sort of like what you think of when you go to Sam's Club or Costco. It's where a lot of food is stored. There's racks and shelving and walk-in coolers and freezers. And those 7 main hubs, they serve over 800 food pantries, soup kitchens, shelters. Like Food Chain is one of our member agencies. So they're one of the 800 groups that we serve. So kind of how it works is I coordinate with farms to food banks. The farmer would call me and I would figure out where in the state they're located and which one of these food bank facilities is closest to their location. And from there, the food banks have loading docks and things like that. And so I would schedule an appointment for the farmer to deliver. And then once it arrived at the food bank, it would go out to the food pantries. And the food banks all manage that in different ways. A lot of them have like a choice system on the computer where the food pantries can log in and see what's available and claim it. And then others just have like a certain day of the week they're supposed to come and they pick up what's available. But that's a little bit of how the process works. And then if you go to our website, which is feedingky.org, you can see a map of our 7 food banks. And we also have our member food pantries listed. So we are a partner agency of Feeding America, the national organization. And so our 7 food banks are also members of Feeding America. And then some more information about the farmers. As I mentioned, we worked with 371 farmers from 63 different counties in Kentucky. I would say about 70 to 80 of those 371 are what I call direct sell farmers. So those people they're directly calling me and scheduling their deliveries. The other remaining farmers, we also work with produce auctions and cooperatives across the state. We've even worked with a couple farmers markets. So the way that works is each person is assigned a grower number, and that is how we track who brings in what item. So a lot of the produce that we're getting through the auctions, the farmer that grew it may not even know that we purchased it, but we're able to get larger quantities and larger varieties by working with the Amish produce auctions as well. So we love doing both. I love working directly with the farmers, and there's perks to both. So I really thank you guys. I don't know what else to say, but yeah, we work with produce auctions, cooperatives, farmers markets, and farmers directly. And the only requirement is that you have to be a Kentucky producer. So we don't buy any produce from outside of the state. And the reason for that is because a lot of our funding comes from the state. So we like to keep the money where it originated from.
Fantastic. Thank you. And again, thanks to Jennifer and Leandra as well. I did notice as you were finishing up, Sarah, that we did have someone that raised their hand. I'm not able to access that, nor do I see that there's an associated question that was dropped in the chat or Q&A that I can determine. So as we turn it back to Lillian and Ashton, maybe we can access that and determine if we have some immediate questions. So if you can all please continue to hang around for a moment, we'll work on this final transition. And again, thank you all for what you do and for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you to the panelists. I really took so much from all of the panels today. In our last few minutes here, I just want to offer a couple of reflections. And I would invite everyone who's still with us today to, if there's something that you learned today that you look forward to taking into your work, into your community, and to emulating, I invite you to share that in the chat so we can see the inspirations that we've had today. Some of the reflections I have is that we heard from Mary earlier that leadership is key in so much of this food systems development work. And what strikes me about all the examples we heard today is how we as local food system practitioners bring our values into that leadership. And when we walk in the truth of our vision for that future, amazing things can happen. All of the incredible work Jennifer Wheeler has done to bring farm to school to a community that wasn't able to experience those experiences, have that food experience before creating new visions for what row crop production can look like in our state. There's so many good examples. Ashley's incredible work aggregating the products of historically marginalized producers and moving them into a vibrant and future filled with wealth and joy. So I invite you to put those in. We heard someone's learning about the Fresh RX program. So lots of practical ideas, lots of values-based ideas. And to echo something, we also heard that this work is about collaboration. This work is about of food systems. And when we started the summit 3 years ago, the question was, who are we really trying to target here? You know, is this the question I always get, is this a conference for farmers? It's like, no, not necessarily. This is for all of us who are interested in that network, in this system that we've heard talked about so much today, because we know that you can't do one thing when it comes to food systems. We're always working together in collaboration and showing our commitment to our community and growing that vibrancy and that sustainability and that health that we mentioned at the opening. So I will just share that and invite you all to share things that you've learned. One announcement I do want to make is we have nominations open every year. The Food Connection gives out an award, our Bill Best Award for Food and Farm Stewards, and we're accepting nominations now. I can share my screen. So I will drop the link to this. Last year, Mark and Velvet Hinkle, if you know them, won the award. We had a virtual First Friday breakfast where they shared their learning. And if you know someone in your community that you'd like to honor who works tirelessly but maybe doesn't get the recognition because they're doing this work of connection and weaving and building, please, the nominations really send me an email about someone that you're inspired by, and we have a committee that will review those. And we're looking to close that by the end of the month. So please share. And I will want to thank my fellow organizers, K-Card, Kentucky Hort Council, Bluegrass Farm to Table, the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, and our team here at the University of Kentucky. We're so grateful to work with you all. I'm so grateful to hold this space together. You know, we're in many of us are in, as we mentioned, this year anniversary of thinking about, wow, everything we've worked through together in the last year and how are we going to recover and rebuild and find resiliency moving forward. And I can't imagine a better community to do that with. Thank you to all our panelists for sharing your expertise and stories and examples and motivating us as we move forward into the new season. And thank you all for showing up and sharing in this conversation. It's amazing. I'm always so delighted that we have so many food systems leaders, food systems enthusiasts who share our passion for this work. So if any of my other co-organizers have any other thoughts they'd like to share, if there are any final sessions. I see a question here linked to the sessions. Yes, we will post recordings of the sessions, certainly on the Food Connections YouTube channel. We'll link to them with our partners. There are also requests for Mary's summary report. We'll get that posted and sent out, and we will send a follow-up email to you all after the session. I know some of you are here for KERS credit, so we'll get that taken care of, send you the links, and invite you to share your feedback and evaluation and let us know what you'd like to see more or less of in the future summits. And what I'd like to see more of is everyone's faces in person. So we'll be sure to do that. And Dr. Potter-Wright, anything else from your end?
No, thanks, Lillian. I think this has been a great morning. Honored to share it with you all. Again, just a huge thank to all of our panelists and speakers for sharing their time with us today to share about the exciting work that's happening around the state. Very, very thankful.
Oh, I'm loving all these comments in the chat. I'm going to leave it open for a while because I'm going to respond to them. But thank you all for sharing with us what you've learned. And continue to drop your links in. We'll try to aggregate those in the webinar follow-up. And we'll look to see you next year. Thanks so much.